I just kind of wanted to recap on the things that we had been talking about healing, which was 2 weeks ago was how Jesus' healing is for everyone, and that the only times that we see in the Gospels where healing didn't happen was when Jesus couldn't heal because of their unbelief and because of the disciples' unbelief. They couldn't heal. It's the only times. Then last week, just to recap on that one, was that unbelief comes through different places, through a bad report that we get at the doctor's office. And even though for us the truth is the truth, which is Jesus, and that he healed us on the cross, trumps those facts, whatever the facts is. Oh, we're sick, we have this, we have that. And it also comes in through the things that we put in front of our eyes, the things that we speak about, being surrounded by people like that, being surrounded by people that are just love sickness and love to talk about it, watching it on the news, watching TV shows that have to do with sickness, and just putting ourselves in situations where we're constantly, or the moment that we get a bad report, going on Google to search like what it is that, like what could happen from the situation. You have cancer, I could die. So then we're in major unbelief. And a lot of times, something that I don't know that I maybe touched on a little bit last week and I thought was important to mention was also sometimes it's just from our lack of being in belief. So, for example, we are the cares of this world. So, like for example, I have 5 kids, I homeschool, I have a little farm, I have to take care of, we have our house, we want to make our house look nicer, we want to have the latest and greatest, and all these things that cause us to just care so much about that we don't even fill ourselves up with believing. So that brings unbelief in, because you just aren't filling yourself up with the right things. So if you're not filling yourself up with belief, with believing in God, then you're obviously doing the opposite. So I think that's a major thing that I think as a society we have a problem with, that we'll scroll for hours on Facebook and we'll read a Bible verse for 1 second and then expect the results to show that, expect to believe in healing. And I'm saying this because I've had this happen myself, where I'm believing for something, but then I've not done really my laboring attention to the rest, which is just reading my word or getting filled up. And so instead I've been filled with all this other junk, and not have the right things that I need to be able to fight. You're not going to go into a war without the weapons you need, but that's what we all do. We go into a war, like sickness, and we don't have the tools and the weapons that we need to fight that war. We go in empty-handed, and that's what we're doing every time we don't fill ourselves up with the word and understand what it is. But this week, what I wanted to focus on is believing, because sometimes we're like, well, then how do we know we're believing, or what is believing? So faith is believing. And we know in Hebrews 11 it says faith is the confidence. It says the assurance, the confidence. I like the word confidence because it's the confidence of things hoped for. If we are confident in something that we have, for example, if a random stranger comes up to me and says, I put $300 in your account, I'm going to think they're crazy. I'm going to think, I don't have confidence in that person. I don't know who they are. How do they even know how to get into my account? I'm not going to have confidence. I'm not going to go running to the bank to get my $300 out. But if Johnny comes to me and says, hey, I put $300 in the account, what do? Yeah. Let me go spend. Amazon. Exactly. Because I have confidence that he's telling me to put $300 in, I'm going to go spend my $300. Well, it's kind of the same thing. If we don't have confidence, which a lot of us, do it, the name it and claim it, do all these things, but it's not really in confidence. It's just in what we've heard. So that would be like me trusting the person I don't know. I just heard this person tell me they put $300 in, and I don't know this person. I don't have confidence in what they're saying, but I'm just going to go with it and see how it goes. Well, then I'll start spending on my account and have a negative, because that person didn't, that maybe they came up to me by mistake, So it's the same type of thing where confidence comes from knowing who God is, knowing his promises, trusting him, and building that relationship. You can't have confidence. It's just not. You won't have confidence in someone you just met today. You're just not going to build that confidence unless that person does something really powerful to prove that you can trust in them, right? If they died for you, like Jesus did. That's the only way. But other than that, you're not going to meet someone from day one and have confidence. And even people we know for years and years on end, if we don't build a relationship with them, we're not going to have confidence in that person. Just because you're an acquaintance with somebody, like you know them from a distance, doesn't mean you're going to have confidence in that person. Because you don't really know them. You have to really know a person to build confidence, to say, I can trust this person, what they say. That's why I think it's the most important thing, is why we read our word, so we can build our confidence in who God is and what he's done for us, what we have as promised, and we can say, okay, I have confidence, so now I have faith because I have confidence in the things that aren't seen. In Hebrews 11, the first verse says, now faith is the substance or the confidence of things hoped for. So it's no longer the hope. So when people are saying, well, I hope that I'm healed. Well, I hope that this works out. Well, I hope, that's not confidence. That's the thing before confidence. It's the thing that we're hoping for. But confidence says, I have this thing that I'm hoping for. So, and it's the evidence of things not seen. And then it proceeds a few verses down. It says, but without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. We have to trust. This is trusting God. We have to believe that he is, and that he rewards us when we seek him. And so I think for a lot of people, that's their main problem. They just don't build that confidence in knowing who they are. Most people have never read through the Bible, have never even read, maybe they'll go through Matthew, okay, I'm going to read, and then they get bored at the genealogy or something like that. And so then they don't proceed, and they don't look, or they don't understand. And I tell a lot of people, a lot of times I'll be like, I don't care if you don't understand, just keep reading. Keep reading, because the more you read, the more you're going to understand. But if it's like, if I, you're not going to, sometimes how books, like movies, will start from the end to the beginning. You don't understand, you're like, I'm confused, but you don't see people turning off the TV because they're confused. They're like, I want to know what's happening. That's kind of sometimes how we have to look at the Bible. Sometimes you just need to read and keep reading and keep reading, and you build, and then you start saying, for me, I started reading and reading and reading to where when I would have a situation come up, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what the Bible was talking about. Now I understand it. Now it became real to me. But for a lot of people, they just won't get past something, and they'll just turn off that, just like you would turn off the movie and then not know what happened, why this came to be. And the thing that I saw that best explains this is in Mark 11, the story of the fig tree, where Jesus curses it because it didn't have figs that he wanted to eat. And the next day they come by, and the disciples are like, wow, the fig tree's withered up. And he's like, what does he say right when they tell him that? He answers and says to them, have faith in God. And then he says, I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says. Now he doesn't just stop there. He repeats himself to better explain himself. He says, therefore I say to you, whatever things you ask, when you pray, believe you receive them, and you will have them. And this is a hard one for a lot of people, because they don't read this, so they don't know, and so they're just learning from other people. Okay, I have to say that I'm healed. I have to act like a healed person, but then they're still not healed, and they're like, why am I dealing with this? What does the word say? It says, first of all, the whole doubt, unbelief, you can't doubt in your heart, but what is the best verse is verse 24, Mark 11:24. Whatever things you ask when you pray. So if you're asking for healing, if you're saying, God, I need to be healed, you need to believe it, believe that you receive it, and then you will have it. We can't have, I love Betsy says always, the breakthrough before we need to have the breakthrough before the breakthrough. We can't wait for the actual breakthrough. We can't wait. A lot of people pray and they're believing. They lay hands on the sick and they're believing they're healed, but they want to see the manifestation before they actually believe. And that's where you can kind of say, okay, let me see where I am in this. Do I really believe that I'm healed? If you really believed you're healed, then you would take a step of faith and do the things of a healed person. So you wouldn't just lay in a bed, right? You wouldn't just lay on your couch with a wet cloth on your forehead and you would take a step of faith. But and that goes back to, what does faith look like? I always think it's funny when I hear, everyone citing out of James, faith without works is dead, and they're like, you have to feed the homeless. Not that I think it's wrong to feed the homeless or do these good works, like do good things, feed people, give people money, do all these, but really, what is faith? What was the faith that James 2 was talking about, what Hebrews 11 was talking about, and what we see throughout the whole Bible? They weren't little stories of people being fed, unfortunately, or buildings being painted, or a nice little handout. It was people taking steps of faith that were mountains. You can understand why he said, if you say to this mountain, be cast into the sea, and you believe it, then you'll have it. Why? Because it was Abraham offering his son, the one that made him the father of many nations, on the altar, and knowing that I don't remember where it is, but it says that he just was like, okay, well, I guess he's gonna raise him from the dead. Like, he didn't know what it would look like, but he knew that he was taking a step of faith. No one's gonna take I'm not gonna put my child on an altar if I don't believe it, and put a knife up to them and about kill them if I don't believe God. Why would I do that? But a lot of people say they would do that, and then when push comes to shove, they don't do that. So it's really hard for people, because they think that, oh, my faith is that I have to go and be a nice person to my neighbor, and that's great, but that's not what this is talking about. And so when we look at it in the perspective of healing, how does that look? We look at it from the perspective of, we take a step of faith. We say, it proves our faith when we say, I'm getting up, I'm walking out of here, even though my leg's broken, and I'm believing that my leg's broken. That takes a step of faith. How you could be ridiculed by the people around you, you could fall and hurt yourself. So many things could happen, but if you really believe that you're healed, then it's easy for you to get up and walk out, right? That's true faith. Other examples they gave was Noah building an ark, was Rahab keeping the spies in her house, despite she could have been killed by other people because she was keeping them there. There's so many examples, and those were real faith. And for that to me was like, okay, that's faith. That's believing. So what does that look like? I'm not gonna tell each person, okay, that looks like you're not taking your medication. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, what is your step of faith? Nobody else can make that decision for you. And if it's just something small, then that's okay. And start with something small and build from there. I keep reiterating this because I think it's important. If all you can believe for, say you got a diagnosis of cancer, but today, because God is a patient God, He loves us, He's willing to work with us, we inherit the promises little by little, so it's okay to take little steps. If today you got a bad report that you have cancer, first of all, what did He say? Do not be afraid, believe only. So stop, do not be afraid, believe only, and take your first little step of faith. Whether it be believing that maybe you have pain in your body, then just believe for that pain to go. Not the greatest example of this, but this week, I kind of already shared it as a testimony, but this week, my dad called and he's like, he hurt himself playing basketball. I didn't know what the situation was, just that he was swollen, he said, and it was painful. And so when he called, we prayed for the pain to go, and pain went, and the next day he went to the doctor and finds out it's broken, but the doctors were impressed because he had no pain. That's what we were believing for. Now, obviously, it wouldn't have been great if I would have been like, oh, maybe it's broken, let's pray for it to not be, broken, let's take a step. But whatever that's what he wanted at that moment. He's like, I need pain to go. So whatever it is, take that step. Once you see that pain go, you can build upon that faith and say, okay, now I'm going to take a bigger step. I'm going to believe that my next report will be better, that my, whatever numbers need to be elevated, or whatever, scans they did, that it's going to show better, or whatever that may be, until you get to the point where you can believe completely. Because if you come and you sit here and say, I'm going to take a step of faith and I'm going to believe for complete healing, but you haven't built your faith up, and you don't really have confidence in God for that, then you're going to fall, and then it's going to make it worse. Then unbelief comes in and you're like, well, this doesn't work. So start somewhere small, Obviously, take a leap if you can believe for it and build confidence. But in the best way you can build confidence is reading the Word, building yourself up with teachers that talk about healing, putting yourself through a healing school of any, like, instead of building yourself with unbelief of going online, looking at what all the results are, why don't you build yourself up with, let me listen to healing scriptures. Let me listen, just put on YouTube, healing scriptures, and it'll just start telling you healing scriptures. If that's all you can do is lay in bed and listen to healing scriptures, it's one thing that will help you to get somewhere. But I think that the faith thing is the biggest thing that we can prove, because it's the proof of what we believe. Does anybody have any questions so far? I'm kind of talking fast. I kind of went through.
No, I think it's good. The point that you made about it's, to me, it's one of two things. Either you get to know God, and that's what helps you to trust and to have faith in His promises, and including healing, or you receive a prophet in the name of a prophet. You regard as the word of God and not the word of man. So I think even with your dad, he receives your word as the word of God. He has faith in you. He has faith in your ability to lay hands on him and see healing come about. So I think it's one of two ways. Either way, you're putting faith either in the person, or you're putting faith in the word as you study. But at the end of the day, I think that is really important. The part that you mentioned, that you have to get to know God so that you can put trust in His promises. Because a lot of times people want to claim that they have faith and that they believe, but in reality, in that area specifically, like healing, they haven't really studied it, so there's no confidence there for them to receive. And so then they try to believe for something, it doesn't happen, and so then they fall back on the traditional sayings of people of faith. Healing is no longer for our time, or healing isn't for everybody. Look at Paul, look at Job. Like they just try to find ways to explain it away, and instead of self-examining themselves and say, "Hey, I'm missing it. I need to dive deeper into this subject because there's something that I'm missing." So I think that's like a really important point that you made. Like you have to get to know God so that you can have that assurance and that confidence in what He's promised us.
Well, I like what you said about taking, trusting in the prophet for that, but it's like what you always say, Betsy, like sometimes the step of faith is getting up to go to someone that can believe for you. Even if you don't have the belief, then find someone that does, and that's a step of faith in itself, because that means you're trusting in Jesus and them to get what you need, even if you can't do it yourself. So sometimes that's what we need. You know, maybe it's not, you know, it can come in so many different ways. That's why we see, you know, look at the faith of the man that his friends carried him and brought him down through the roof. His 4 friends brought him down through the roof. It was his faith ultimately. There's a reason why Jesus said that. So obviously, like, no friends are just going to come and pick you up unless you want them to. And you see that with the woman with the issue of blood. It was her faith in, this is going to heal me. If I go here and meet him. And honestly, that's probably another big thing, is that a lot of people are waiting for healing to come to them and expecting healing to come, begging God for healing, and then they're not understanding why they're not receiving that healing. And it's like, well, did you get up and go and search for your healing? Did you seek and find? This doesn't say it's not a passive thing. It doesn't say, like, everywhere we hear is, if you seek, you'll find. If you knock, the door will open. If you search for this, you're going to get it. If you ask for it, you will get it. But it takes us to do something. That's why it says, be a doer of the word, not just a hearer. And that's what too many people are doing. They're hearing things, and that's what, as far as they're saying. So then they beg God, they pray for these things, and it says, lay hands on the sick. They're not just doing what the word says. They're just praying and begging God and expecting God. And God's like, I've already done it. You have everything you need. And then people are getting mad. And also on the end of pastors or evangelists or whoever is in doing this, it's scary. Because they're like, well, now I have to, but it's the same concept for them too. I have to believe for people. I have to make this happen. No, you don't have to make anything happen. some of the best times that I've seen people healed, and not that I don't see it all the time, but I'm saying like some of the best testimonies I've had was when I had nothing to offer. And I realized that the other day. I have confidence in him because there has been so many times that I'm like, I myself maybe was dealing with something that I was fighting off and having to believe for, and then somebody was like, can you pray for me? And I was like, oh my, if we go based on how I'm feeling right now, no, I can't pray for you. But then it was like, no, because we're not going based off of what I'm feeling. I'm going based off of the word of God. I'm going to pray for you. You're going to be healed. I'm going to lay hands on you. You're going to be healed. And that's been the best times. And so sometimes remember, it's in our weakness where he is strong. It's in the places that so it's about you stepping out. You put your hands on the sick. Sometimes it had to come back and be like, man, I felt nothing praying for a whole line of people. It felt so lack of like any feeling. But I've known God is so good that he's going to cover where I don't feel like, okay, I laid hands on all these people, and then I'll hear testimony after testimony of things that happen, and I'm like, that's because it has nothing to do with me. The more we can learn, it has nothing to do with us, and more just him. He's already done it. We just have to do our part of laying hands on people and delivering people and speaking things over people. Then we can have confidence in that. The more we build that confidence, stepping out when we don't feel like we have confidence. Like, I guess that was kind of.
I think it's really good. You know, when it said that they went out and they spoke the word with boldness, and he confirmed their words with signs and wonders following. A lot of times I think we think about that specific verse and we just see them as like lions and they're just being bold. But I think that what you're saying is that boldness too, like where you feel like you got nothing to offer. But you know what? If you know that it's not you, that you just need to ask people to come up for prayer and lay hands on, that's boldness.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes I think we think it needs to be like to the most extreme degree of boldness, but sometimes all it is you saying, hey, I'm going to lay hands on people even if I don't feel like it, and I'm going to see that God's going to confirm, the Spirit's going to confirm what I'm saying with healing testimonies.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because it's like if you think back to most of the people, they weren't like the disciples. Most of the disciples, they weren't men of like teachers and prophets. They weren't like that. They were fishers. Like they didn't have all this, knowledge of what it. They just were like, okay, we're gonna follow you. He said, follow me. They followed him. They did everything he said, and when they couldn't figure it out, what did they do? They still asked him, what did we do wrong? Let's figure this out. And that was their boldness, that they just would do whatever God told them to do. Yeah. A lot of times that's the problem. People don't want to. God's like, take a step of faith, just stand up. And people are like, well, I don't feel good, or, I feel this way, or I don't know, did I really hear God? Do I really, when he tells you something about whether it be like you just feel like you're supposed to get up, then you need to trust that and go with confidence. And I think that was the thing that the disciples had for them, that they weren't like, they didn't have like this, this was just a man that was walking with them. They had to have confidence when the whole world, think about it back then, they had to have confidence in Jesus when everybody else was saying, this is not the Messiah. Yeah, they had to, and they didn't even know the fullness of that. I mean, you can see it throughout the Gospels, like they didn't really realize, I think, the fullness of that until he was actually resurrected. So, but they still had their confidence, and they were seeing these signs and wonders, and they were like, okay, that's enough confidence for us. Let's go out and do what we. And then you hear them after he's been resurrected and he's up in heaven. You hear the confidence they have when they're like, we don't have gold and silver, but this is what we have, and let's lay hands. We're gonna be. Faith was we're gonna be tortured for Christ. It doesn't matter that what it looks like, because we believe in what we're saying and we have confidence in this. We're gonna still preach Jesus even when we're being put in jail, we're being tortured. That was faith. And so I just think that is like an interesting thing of that's the boldness. It's not this boldness. I think people think that as evangelists or as pastors we have a special boldness that nobody else
Fires
has.
coming out of our hands.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not like that.
I know.
Like we're just the normal everyday people. I clean my house every day, scrub toilets, And people think that, oh well, no, we live on. No, it's not. Those are the people that are the easiest to work with. Not, oh my God, I'm so humble. I'm the easiest person to work with. God can really. No, but really, like, the willingness. It's just about willingness. People think that it's like, I hear people say like, oh, you did this and it's so great. And I'm like, it's not any different from you. There's no like. Yeah, that's great. God's able to use me because I'm willing, but it's not like this. It's not like you can't do that. I can't stand when people are like, oh my God, that's so great, and I just wish I could do that. Well, stop pushing and just do it. You know, like
a lot of people aren't willing to do the work and the work.
No.
But and the things like when you're going down a healing line and you feel like nothing, you're exhausted, you feel absolutely like completely bored. Like, okay, bless you. And
bored.
Like bored with yourself. Like,
yes,
I'm sick of hearing myself talk.
Yes.
Like and then they have these fabulous like medical miracles. They hand you the medical report. For 28 years I've been in agony, and you touch me and it's gone. I haven't felt, my shoulder hasn't felt like this. I've never felt no pain in my life and stuff like that. And I think it's because that's a picture of faith. Like,
yes.
You feel nothing.
And yet you do it.
It's just you do it anyway. And faith is the substance of the things hoped for. And like this last trip, I had this guy come up and he said his testimony was that the humility also of taking a step of faith, humbling yourself, because there was something you said. I feel like some of the sacrifice of faith is just humbling yourself. Oh, because Johnny, you were saying people going to her, she's a mom, she's a woman, she didn't go to Bible college, and yet submitting there, like saying, I need you. I can't do this. A grown man, smarter than all of us, coming up and saying, so I had this example of that. This last trip, this guy came up, he said, when you put your hand on my head, my foot popped, and now look, he was rotating it, he could move it, had been injured, there was no pain. He goes, I know a lot of you don't believe in this, but this happened to me. Like, he was trying to explain, like, this is a real thing. And then he came up to me later and he goes, I just wanted to tell you that I didn't want to go up to the altar because I didn't think someone like you could do this for me. I'm like, what do you mean someone like me? I'm a woman? And he goes, no. And I said, well, then what do you mean? What do you mean? It's because I'm a woman. He goes, and he started smiling and breathing and he put his head down. He goes, yeah. He goes, but God proved me wrong. God proved me wrong. And the thing that saved him and that got him his healing is he was willing to submit him, to sacrifice his pride and just say, I'm going to go up and receive the prophet's reward. And not even really go to Jesus, but go to some woman who said, have confidence in her. And then now he knows God did it.
Yeah.
So I like what Johnny was pointing out, according to what you were saying about how your stepfather went to you and to receive a prophet's reward.
Yeah. And it's funny because sometimes I've seen grown men just like big gnarly dudes at prison in full blown tears because they're
going to you to heal them.
One of my favorite things was one time I had a man that he was just full blown, just crying, sobbing, snot running all over. And I said, and I had just gone down the line and I came back to ask about testimonies and he's like, you prayed for my eyes and I can see. And that was big for me because that's just not something I had seen. I even prayed for his glass eye. And I still remembered and I was like, okay, whatever. Like, that was a lot for me. But the thing is, I remember the thing that was what built my confidence that day was I just started going down the line and as I could see these men just like shocked. Like I could see them as I was praying, shocked about things I was either praying for them or telling them or whatever. So by the time I got to him, I was like, and then reach for your glass eye too, and kept going. And then I remember thinking how, like, for a moment I was a little bit like, that's idiotic. Why would I pray for your glass eye too? Like, he would just see it. Perfect. And then he was crying and he was in shock. And I was like, I'm a little bit in shock. But really, it was like, that's the thing. Or praying for someone. I prayed for someone feeling the worst I've ever felt in my life. Like, fever, body aches, everything, and I've had to pray. This person was like, please just pray for me, pray for me. Met them up, prayed for them, left, and then find out they got healed of diabetes. And yeah, I felt like there was nothing, but I took a step of faith because I was like, I know that it's not about me. gonna go and lay hands on her and she's gonna be healed. And sure enough, she was, and it was just such a great testimony. But it comes back to that, like, she had her faith. She didn't even she had her faith in what you were saying, in me. Mm-hmm. She trusted me, and then realized after that was like, all like, okay, tell me more, because you proved something.
Yeah.
So,
and then they know God did it. It's the idiotic religious thing is, oh, you're saying you healed somebody.
You healed,
yeah. Jesus told me to heal people. So yeah.
He said,
and then
hands on the sick and
recover. And he said, you be the light of the world and you shine, and then they'll glorify God when they see after what happens.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
really good.
That's the thing this week. How to be in faith. Any questions, concerns, testimonies? It's just funny because I feel like it's what you were saying, Betsy. Like, so many people aren't willing to put work on that, just laboring in the Word to figure out what that looks like.
Like, what if you, instead of watch TV, watched a whole series of T.L. Osborne or Andrew or one of our, like, go on YouVisitedMe.tv and watch all our stuff, like, on healing.
Well, I remember when I first started learning about this, that I used to sit, he was in college still, and I would sit for like 2-3 hours with all my recorded, like pre-recorded things to watch. Yeah. And I remember one day, I just felt like God was like, seriously, you're gonna keep watching TV? And I was like, okay, I'm done. And I just started, and then after that, I started just reading my Bible instead of doing that, and listening to, different teachings. I was already going to house church, and then it was like, man, it was like super fast, like a bullet train, learning this stuff, because that's all I was doing. I wasn't.
Good.
I'm like, I'm done.